It all began with a letter. Claire had just returned from her shift at the local art gallery when she found the thick envelope wedged under her door. The return address was from a law office in Vermont, a place she hadn't thought about since childhood. With shaking hands, she opened it. Inside was a will. Her great-uncle, Elias Whitmore, had passed away 2 months ago. She barely remembered him, an eccentric recluse who had lived alone in a sprawling, isolated house on the outskirts of a forgotten town. He had no children, no close family. Just Claire. And he had left her everything. 3 weeks later, Claire stood at the edge of the cracked stone path leading to Whitmore House. It was early autumn, the trees blazed orange and red, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house loomed like a sleeping giant, its woodwork aged and rotting, ivy snaking across broken shutters, and a heavy silence hanging in the air. Claire had no plans to stay long. She only needed to assess the property, sign the legal documents, and maybe find something she could sell to cover her rising bills back in the city. But something about the place tugged at her. A strange sense of familiarity. Of unfinished business. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood. She coughed as she pushed open the parlor doors and stepped into what looked like a museum of forgotten time. Victorian furniture sat beneath white sheets. Cobwebs glistened in the corners. Shelves full of leather-bound books lined the study. And then she saw it. At the top of the staircase, in a dim hallway just beyond the landing, hung a massive painting. The frame was ornate, dark mahogany carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The painting itself was a masterwork of eerie realism. It depicted a narrow, dimly lit room with faded wallpaper and a high-backed chair. A figure stood near the far wall, half submerged in darkness. Claire couldn't make out its face. She squinted. Something about the angle of the room looked familiar, too familiar. But before she could dwell on it, her phone buzzed. A message from her best friend, Jenna. Everything okay? Claire typed back, yeah. Just creepy old house stuff. You'd love it. She didn't mention the painting. Not yet. That night, she settled into one of the cleaner bedrooms, lighting a few candles since the electricity hadn't been restored yet. As she tried to sleep, the wind howled outside. The wooden walls creaked. Somewhere below, a clock chimed. She thought of the painting again. How its shadows seemed deeper than they should be. How the figure felt less like a subject and more like a watcher. The next morning, Claire went room to room cataloging the house's contents. Most of it was junk, moth-eaten linens, warped furniture, old photographs of people she didn't recognize. But in Elias's study, she found a leather-bound journal. Inside were scrawled entries, uneven and frantic toward the end. She's almost free. The painting must not be moved. Don't let her see you sleep. Claire frowned. Who was she? She flipped through more pages. Drawings of the same room in the painting appeared again and again. Sometimes the figure was seated. Sometimes it stood. Once, Elias had scribbled over the page in thick black ink as if trying to erase whatever he'd drawn. Claire closed the journal and set it down. Maybe Elias had gone mad in his final years. Maybe the loneliness had eaten away at him. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. That night, as she brushed her teeth in the hallway bathroom, she passed the painting again. She stopped. Looked at it. The figure seemed clearer now. Taller. She could almost see its face, still indistinct, but somehow closer. She shook her head and walked away. Just her imagination. Just an old painting in an old house. But deep inside, a part of her knew this was no ordinary painting. The days passed slowly inside the Whitmore house. Claire did her best to stay busy, taking inventory of the furniture, going through boxes in the attic, and dusting off old shelves. But no matter where she went in the house, she always felt its presence. That painting. It loomed at the top of the stairs like a sentry, silent and still, yet oddly alive. On the third night, she awoke to the sound of footsteps. They were light, cautious, too deliberate to be the house creaking with age. She sat up, her heart pounding, straining to hear. Silence. Then another step just outside her bedroom door. She grabbed her phone and switched on the flashlight, creeping toward the door. Nothing. She opened it and peeked out into the hallway. Dim moonlight spilled through the dusty windows. The corridor was empty. And yet, the painting was there, watching. The shadowed figure inside it still seemed to stand in the same place, but Claire could have sworn it was turned slightly more toward the hallway now. She forced a nervous laugh and shook her head. Get a grip, Claire. But the next morning, things escalated. She came down for breakfast and noticed the kitchen chair slightly pulled out, though she hadn't used it. A cabinet door hung ajar. The old pendulum clock in the hall ticked loudly, despite her remembering it had no pendulum at all. She examined it again. Still broken. Probably squirrels in the walls, she muttered. Or I'm sleepwalking. Yet she'd never sleepwalked before. Later that day, as she carried boxes down to the basement, she slipped on the third step. Her hand shot out just in time to catch the banister, preventing a fall. At the bottom of the stairs, in the far right corner, she noticed something new. A framed canvas leaning against the wall, covered in a sheet. She hesitated, then walked toward it. Dust exploded as she pulled back the cloth. It wasn't another painting, it was the same one. But how could that be? She raced back up the stairs, heart pounding, and ran to the hallway. The original painting still hung in its place. Now there were two. No, she thought. Maybe it had just been a copy. An unfinished draft. Still, the realization gave her chills. Elias had clearly been obsessed with it. That night, sleep came uneasily. Claire tossed and turned, dreaming of dim hallways and creaking floors. In her dream, she stood in the hallway, looking at the painting. But the figure inside it moved. Slowly, subtly. It raised its hand and touched the edge of the painted frame. Claire woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. She sat up, trying to steady her breath. A cold breeze drifted across her face. The window was closed. She turned toward the door. It was open. She had locked it before bed. And something else was wrong. She stood, legs shaky, and walked into the hallway. Her eyes went to the painting instinctively. Her blood ran cold. The figure had changed. It was now closer to the foreground, no longer standing by the far wall. Its head was slightly tilted, as if studying her. The shadows around it were sharper, the outline clearer. A faint shape of fingers gripped the painted doorframe inside the image. Claire stepped back. "Nope," she whispered. "No. No, no, no." She ran back into her room, shut the door, and pushed a dresser in front of it. For the rest of the night, she sat on her bed with the lights on, phone clutched in hand. Every creak made her flinch. The silence felt like it was listening, watching. By morning, her rational mind tried to explain it away. She was exhausted, stressed, maybe even projecting memories of her uncle's decline. After all, Elias had isolated himself here for decades. This place could drive anyone a little mad. Still, she couldn't deny what she'd seen. The painting had changed, and it was changing again. That afternoon, she took a photo of it with her phone. She zoomed in on the figure, analyzing every line. The next day, she'd do the same, compare the two images. Just to be sure. Just to prove to herself that she wasn't losing her mind. But deep down, Claire knew. This wasn't just paint on canvas. Someone was inside that frame. And it was waking up. Claire spent most of the next morning staring at the photo she had taken of the painting. She compared it side by side with the original, same shadows, same angle, same haunting figure, but there was a difference. In the photo, the figure appeared just a step farther forward than it had the day before. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't imagined it. She needed answers. That afternoon, she drove into town. It was a small, quiet place with only a few stores, a diner, and a post office. Most of the locals gave her curious glances, likely recognizing the name Whitmore. She stopped at a small antique bookstore tucked between a barber shop and a bakery. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and varnish. "Can I help you?" asked the elderly shopkeeper, a woman with silver hair tied in a neat bun. Claire showed her a printout of the painting's photo. "Do you recognize this?" The woman's face changed instantly. Her pleasant expression dropped into something tight and wary. "Where did you get this?" "It was in my great-uncle's house. Elias Whitmore." The woman stiffened. "That house," she looked around the empty store, then lowered her voice. "He kept that thing for decades. I warned him. Everyone did. He didn't listen." Claire's heart pounded. "What do you mean? What is it?" The woman hesitated, then gestured for Claire to follow. She led her to a locked cabinet in the back of the store and pulled out a leather-bound catalog. It was old, dated over 100 years ago, and titled The Forgotten Works of Renata Vale. Claire flipped through the pages, stopping cold when she saw the painting. Same room. Same figure. Same oppressive darkness. Renata Vale was an artist in the 1800s, the woman explained. A recluse. Obsessed with capturing life and death in her work. She painted only 13 pieces before she vanished. Vanished? Disappeared from her studio. No trace. Her last work was The Hallway Witness. That one. Claire looked at the image. Why do people think it's cursed? Because wherever that painting goes, strange things follow. Doors open by themselves. People have nightmares. They claim the figure moves. That it watches. Claire's throat went dry. What happened to the others who owned it? The woman sighed. A man in Chicago claimed the figure spoke to him through his dreams. He stopped sleeping. Eventually jumped from a window. Another owner, an artist like you, burned all her canvases and was found muttering about the girl in the frame. She ended up in an asylum. Claire's hands trembled. The shopkeeper put a hand on hers. I'd get rid of it, dear. Before it gets too close. Claire returned home shaken. As she pulled into the driveway, she saw something through the upstairs window, a flicker of movement near the hallway. She rushed inside. Everything looked normal until she climbed the stairs. The painting had changed again. Now, the figure stood only a few steps from the foreground. Its outline was sharper. Its head was angled downward as if looking at Claire directly. She felt a sudden, dizzy wave of fear. That night, Claire locked herself in her room again. She propped a chair under the doorknob. Just in case. She set her phone to record overnight and placed it facing the hallway just outside her room. She had to know if the figure was moving when she wasn't watching. The next morning, she played back the footage. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Just shadows shifting with the moonlight. Then, around 3:17 a.m., the lights flickered. And for a brief moment, the camera caught something horrifying. The painted figure tilted its head. Just slightly. Slowly. Toward the lens. Claire dropped the phone. Her breath hitched. Her vision blurred. It wasn't just a trick of the light. The painting had moved. Not inside a dream. Not in her imagination. It moved while she slept. This wasn't just a haunted house. This was a prison. And the thing inside the painting? It was trying to get out. Claire didn't sleep the next night. She sat on her bed with every light in the room turned on, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Every creak of the floor, every sigh of the wind outside set her on edge. The video replayed in her mind on a loop, the tilt of the painted figure's head, the flicker of its shadow. She knew she wasn't hallucinating. She hadn't imagined it. Something was moving inside that painting. By 4 a.m., exhaustion began to pull at her. Her eyes fluttered, her head dipped forward, and for a few minutes she dozed off until a loud crash jolted her awake. Claire jumped to her feet. The sound had come from the hallway. She grabbed the metal flashlight beside her bed and edged toward the door, carefully removing the chair she'd wedged beneath the handle. The hallway was pitch black. The air felt colder than it should have been. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the switch. When the lights flickered on, she gasped. The painting was on the floor. The thick, ornate frame had come off the wall and now lay face up, cracked glass splintered across the floorboards. But that wasn't the worst part. The figure inside the painting had changed again. It was no longer standing in the hallway. Now it was at the very edge of the frame, hands pressed against what looked like invisible glass. Its face, once blurred in shadow, was disturbingly clear. It looked like a woman. But something was terribly wrong. Her eyes were completely black. Her mouth slightly open in a silent scream. Her hands had long, sharp fingers. And her skin, pale, veined, seemed too real, too textured for mere brushstrokes. Claire dropped the flashlight. In the silence, she heard something faint. Breathing. Ragged. Wet. Clothes. She backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off the painting. Her foot bumped against the flashlight, sending it rolling. The beam spun wildly across the hallway walls, landing briefly on the far end of the corridor, and what it revealed made Claire scream. For a split second, she saw a shadow standing at the corner. Not painted. Real. It vanished as soon as the light moved. She slammed the bedroom door and locked it, heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her breaths came in short, panicked bursts. She grabbed her phone and texted Jenna, "Something's in the house. I need help. Please call me." She sat with her back against the door until morning, jumping at every sound. When the sun rose, she stepped back into the hallway. The painting still lay on the floor, glass scattered like ice. She picked it up carefully and leaned it against the wall. Despite the broken frame, the image remained intact. But now the woman's mouth had changed. It was smiling. Claire staggered back. She didn't understand it. Paintings didn't just alter themselves. This wasn't some art illusion or trick of the eye. This was active, intelligent. The thing in the painting was aware of her. She rushed to Elias's study, hoping his journal had more answers. Flipping past the early entries, she found a section marked with a strange symbol, like a circle with thorns. She watches through the paint. Every movement we make, she learns. At night, she stirs. And once she learns your name, She speaks it. Claire whispered aloud. What is she? Another passage read. Never speak to her. Never listen. Once she hears her name in your voice, she'll find her way out. Claire's phone buzzed. Jenna calling. She answered quickly. Jenna. Thank God. But her words caught in her throat. A second voice echoed faintly through the speaker. Not Jenna's. A whisper. A woman's whisper. Muffled and low. It said Claire's name. Once. Twice. Claire dropped the phone. Her ears rang. She didn't call out, didn't scream, because a voice was answering her from inside her own head. Let me out, Claire. The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was patient. Soft. And it was already inside. The days that followed blurred together. Claire stopped sleeping. The fear of closing her eyes became too overwhelming. Every time she dozed off, she'd wake up with a jolt, sometimes screaming, sometimes crying. The dreams were always the same: the hallway, the painting, the woman creeping closer, whispering from behind the frame. The voice in her mind wasn't constant, but it was always waiting. At first, it only whispered her name. But now it was saying other things. Dark things. You belong here. She left me. You won't. We can trade places. Claire boarded up the hallway where the painting hung. She nailed wood panels across the doorway, sealed it off with furniture, and shoved towels under the gap to block out even the air. Still, the feeling of being watched never left. It clung to her like smoke. Her phone was nearly dead. She couldn't bring herself to charge it. Jenna had tried calling again, but Claire ignored the calls. What would she even say? Hey, there's a woman inside a painting trying to escape, and she might be in my head. Instead, she read more of Elias's journal. His final entries were erratic, full of paranoia and ink smeared by shaking hands. He had clearly gone through the same cycle: confusion, fear, sleeplessness, desperation. Then she found a page torn from the back of the book. The handwriting was clearer, more deliberate, as if Elias had calmed just long enough to leave a warning. The painting was not meant to be seen. It's a prison, not a window. She was a seer in life, a woman who claimed to speak to the dead. But she went too far. They locked her soul in the canvas. Renata painted it to trap her. A seal. It weakens if the painting is disturbed, if it's stared at for too long, if her name is spoken. I made the mistake. I spoke to her. Now she knows me. Now she wants out. Claire slammed the book shut. She couldn't do this anymore. She packed her bag, just essentials, and decided to leave. Forget the house. Forget the inheritance. Forget Elias. Let someone else deal with the cursed thing. But as she opened the front door, she stopped dead. Standing outside was the woman from the painting. Not a hallucination. Not a shadow. She stood just beyond the porch, barefoot on the gravel driveway. Her dress was tattered, soaked in dark stains. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes black and endless. Claire blinked and the woman was gone. No footprints. No movement. Just air and silence. She stepped back inside and locked the door. This was madness. She couldn't even trust her own eyes now. And then she heard the sound. Scratching. Not from the walls. From inside the painting. Against the glass. Claire pressed her hands over her ears and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed the heaviest knife she could find. She marched back to the boarded-up hallway, tore down the panels, and stared at the canvas. The woman in the painting was gone. Gone. The hallway inside the image was empty. Claire's knees nearly gave out. This was impossible. She backed away slowly, but the floor groaned behind her. She spun around and saw a dark shape vanish into the next room. She chased it, knife raised, shouting, "Get out. This is my house." But when she entered the room, it was empty. Except for the mirrors. Every mirror in the house now reflected the hallway from the painting. And in each reflection, the woman stood just behind Claire. Smiling. Claire screamed, smashing the nearest mirror with the knife. Glass flew in all directions. Still, in the shards, the painted hallway stretched out endlessly, the woman stepping forward again and again, frame by frame. The house was no longer just haunted. It was becoming her. Every room felt warped, like she had stepped inside the painting itself. The walls closed in. The clock stopped ticking. The furniture shifted on its own. Claire dropped to her knees, sobbing. She could feel the woman in her thoughts now, not whispering, but breathing with her. Echoing her fears. Feeding on them. And the scariest part? A part of Claire was starting to understand her. To pity her. To listen. Claire hadn't eaten in days. The kitchen was full of moldy fruit and dry cereal she could no longer stomach. Her cheeks were sunken, her eyes ringed with dark circles. But she no longer cared about sleep or food or escape. She cared only about the painting. Or what was behind it. The mirrors were gone. Not smashed, vanished. Overnight, every single reflective surface in the house disappeared. Claire woke up to find empty walls and blank frames. Even the sink faucet, once polished chrome, was now dull and gray. Only one thing remained constant, the painting. No longer hanging, it now stood freely at the center of the hallway on its easel like it had claimed the space. The woman inside it stood at the front of the canvas, nearly full-bodied, her eyes staring out with impossible depth. And she was still smiling. Claire sat cross-legged in front of the painting, journal open, flipping through the entries for the 100th time. She had stopped seeing Elias as crazy. Now he felt like the only person who ever understood. "It's not possession," Elias wrote. "It's invitation. That's the trick. She doesn't take you. You let her in." Claire whispered, "Then how do I close it?" She flipped to the final page. There, scrawled in a shaky hand, was a sentence underlined 3 times, "Only the artist can seal her away again." Claire stared at the words, numb. The artist? Renata Vale? She'd been dead for over a century. There was no sealing it again. No reversal. No undoing. Unless the artist wasn't a person anymore, but a role. A task. Claire was a painter. Maybe that's why the house had chosen her. Why Elias left everything to her. Maybe he believed she could finish what Renata started. She stumbled down to the basement where Elias had kept all his old painting supplies. Dust coated every surface, but the canvases, brushes, and pigments were intact. She brought them upstairs and set up a makeshift studio across from the painting itself. And then, for the first time in weeks, Claire picked up a brush. She stared at the painting, not the cursed one, but her own blank canvas. Her hands trembled. She didn't know what she was supposed to paint. A copy? A seal? A prison? The whispers in her mind grew louder. They tried to distract her. To stop her. The voice promised freedom, love, purpose. But Claire ignored them. She began painting not the woman but the hallway behind her. Every shadow. Every crack in the wall. Every floorboard. Next, she painted the figure. Not as a monster but as a memory. A forgotten soul. Pale and cold. Her eyes no longer black but empty. Her hands reaching, not to harm but to be seen. Hours passed. Daylight faded and still Claire painted. And when she was nearly finished, she felt it. A presence behind her. The air dropped 10 degrees. She didn't turn around. Instead, she whispered, "I see you." And for the first time, the voice didn't whisper back. She signed her name at the bottom of the canvas. As soon as the last stroke dried, the house went silent. Utterly, completely silent. Claire finally turned around. The cursed painting, the original, was gone. Not destroyed. Not fallen. Just gone. In its place was her own painting. Her version. The same hallway. The same shadows. But the woman was now curled in the corner. Eyes closed. Peaceful. And most importantly, still. Claire stepped forward, hand trembling, and reached out to touch the canvas. Nothing happened. No movement. No breath. No whispers. Just paint. For the first time in weeks, Claire smiled. It wasn't over. Not yet. But she had bought herself time. Maybe the curse could never be erased. But it could be contained. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, Claire awoke on the floor, wrapped in an old blanket, sunlight bleeding softly through the curtains. For the first time in weeks, she had slept deeply, without dreams. No whispers. No shifting shadows. Just silence. She sat up and looked at her canvas, the one she had painted to trap the woman. It stood exactly where she left it, and the figure inside hadn't moved. Her eyes remained closed. Her posture unchanged. It was just paint. Just oil on canvas. Claire allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that it was over. She stepped outside for the first time in days. The morning air was crisp and cool, and the forest around the house no longer felt threatening. For the first time since inheriting the place, the house didn't feel like it was watching her. But that peace was short-lived. When she came back inside, her phone buzzed, a low, vibrating hum that made her heart clench. It had been dead for days, but now it showed 87% battery, glowing with a single message notification. Unknown number, you can't trap what never belonged to you. Claire's fingers went cold. She turned toward the painting. Still unmoved. Still silent. But something was wrong. The hallway she'd painted now had a slight curve at the end, barely noticeable before, but now more pronounced. The corner was darker. Deeper. Like it led somewhere else. And the figure, while still sitting, seemed subtly different. Her mouth slightly more open. A flicker of dread passed through Claire's chest. She grabbed the canvas and rushed outside. She had read enough in Elias's journal to know that while the painting could be used as a prison, it had to be sealed completely. If the prisoner found a weakness, they could begin unraveling it from the inside. She needed to destroy it. Claire set the canvas down in a fire pit behind the house, surrounded by old stones and weeds. She doused it with gasoline, took a deep breath, and dropped a match. Flames roared to life, swallowing the canvas. Black smoke curled into the sky. The scent of burning oil and wood filled the air. For a few moments, she felt a strange mix of grief and relief. But then came the scream. It wasn't from the house. It wasn't from the woods. It came from inside her own head. A shriek so sharp, so primal, it made her drop to her knees, clutching her skull. The fire burned brighter, the wind howled, and in her mind's eye, Claire saw the woman in the painting standing. Screaming. Burning. "You can't kill me," the voice howled. "You made me real." Claire shouted back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't belong here." Then the voice said something that froze her blood. "Neither do you." Suddenly, everything went black. She woke up hours later, the fire long dead, ash swirling in the wind. The painting was gone. Not even a frame remained. But something was different. The house no longer creaked when she entered. The air felt lighter. The mirrors, once vanished, were back, but only showed her reflection. She checked the walls, the hallway, every corner of the home. No painting. No shadow. No whisper. It was truly gone. For the next few days, Claire cleaned the house, aired out the rooms, restored some order to her life. She even contacted Jenna and explained only half-truths, that the place had been making her sick, that she was better now. But in the back of her mind, one thing kept echoing: "You made me real." She wondered what that meant. Was the woman a ghost? A trapped soul? Or had Claire's attention, her obsession, given her form? Maybe that was the true curse, not the painting itself, but the act of believing in it. Feeding it. Shaping it. Creating it. Claire began to paint again, but now with caution. Her brushes moved slower. Her colors gentler. She painted landscapes, light, faces full of warmth, not mystery. But even then, every now and then, she'd wake up at night and feel it again. The faintest sensation of being watched. And in her dreams, the hallway returned. Not the real one. The painted one. But this time, it was empty. For now. Months passed. Claire sold the house. She told the realtor that it wasn't a good fit and that she wanted to return to the city. She didn't mention the painting, or Elias's journal, or the voice that had lived in her head. No one would have believed her anyway. She boxed up what little she had brought with her and left the house without looking back. It had taken everything from her: her peace, her sleep, her trust in reality. But it had also given her one thing she hadn't had in a long time: clarity. She now understood the danger of creating without intention. That art was not always just art. That some doors, once opened, could never be fully closed. In the city, life moved forward. She rented a small apartment with white walls and wide windows. She got a job restoring damaged paintings at a museum, something quiet, something simple. She didn't paint anymore, not for herself. The brushes stayed sealed in a box under her bed. Until one night. It started like any other. She made tea, curled up on the couch, scrolled through her messages. It had been a peaceful day. Uneventful. Then the power went out. Total darkness. A blackout. A fuse. She rose to check the hallway switch, phone flashlight in hand. That's when she saw it. A painting leaning against the far wall. Unframed. Slightly torn at the corners. Claire's blood ran cold. She hadn't brought any of her old work with her. She had left it all behind. Burned it. And yet, there it was. She stepped forward cautiously, heart pounding in her ears. Her phone's flashlight trembled in her grip. The painting was of a hallway. Not the one in Elias's house, but her apartment's hallway. Same cracked tile. Same pale blue wall. Same flickering ceiling light. And at the end of it, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure. Not clear. Not yet. But watching. Claire backed away slowly, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "I destroyed you," the silence answered. But as she turned, she saw a mirror, her bathroom door, slightly ajar, showing just a sliver of reflection. In that sliver, she saw herself. And behind her, the figure. Closer. No painting. No canvas. Just there. Claire screamed and slammed the door shut. Her breath came in frantic gasps, the teacup crashing to the floor. When she looked again, nothing. No figure. No painting. Just an empty hallway and a broken silence. But she knew better now. The woman had never been bound by wood or frame. She had been invited, welcomed, and perhaps remembered. Claire didn't call anyone. She didn't run. She simply sat back down, pulled out a canvas, and started to paint. Not out of fear, not out of madness, but because she understood that some things cannot be forgotten. They live in brushstrokes, in memories, in minds, and sometimes, when the night is quiet and the house is still, a single whisper rides the air. Thank you for setting me free. 26.